Hello everyone and welcome to today's class. On today's lesson, we are going to learn about the clutch. And by the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to 1. Define clutch and state its purpose. Identify different types of clutch and its components. Explain the principal operation of the clutch. Now, what is a clutch? A clutch is a mechanical device that engages and disengages power transmission from a drive shaft to a driven shaft. Now, we have seen that a clutch is a mechanical device that engages and disengages power transmission from a drive shaft to a driven shaft. Now, we know that a clutch has three main purposes, and the first purpose is to permit a smooth and gradual engagement of the drive. 2. To assist in gear changing, and lastly, to provide a temporary neutral. Now we have seen the definition and purpose of a clutch. Now let's move to the types of a clutch. We have several types of a clutch, but we will only tackle on these 5 types. And the first type is single plate clutch. We have multi-plate clutch. Number 3, diaphragm spring clutch. Number 4, cone clutch, and lastly, coil spring clutch. Those are the 5 types of clutch that we will tackle on. So let's now move to the components of the clutch. We will later on come and see these types. We have several types. We have several components of a clutch. And I will first mention them here. We have the pressure plate, 2 friction plates, we have the flywheel, we have the release bearing, and we have the cover plate. Pressure plate, as its name implies, it implies pressure to the clutch disc for the transfer of torque to the transmission. The pressure plate, when coupled with the clutch disc and flywheel, it makes and breaks the flow of power from engine to the transmission. That is the function of the pressure plate. Number 2, we have the friction plate. Friction plate function is to allow the transmission input shaft and the engine to run at the same speed when rotating. A friction clutch plate is used in vehicle to allow the transmission input shaft and engine to run at the same speed when rotating. The friction that is created between the engine and the transmission is now what provides the force required to move the vehicle. We have another component called the flywheel. Flywheel does many things. It acts as a balancer for the engine. It dampens engine vibration caused by the firing of each cylinder. It provides a smooth machine, that is friction, surface that the clutch can contact. But its main function is to transfer engine torque from the engine to the transmission. That is the main function of the flywheel. We have another component, that is number 4, the release bearings. Release bearings are used in parts that transfer or shut off the driving force. When the clutch release bearings are used in the part that transfer or shut off the driving force, and when the driving force is shut off, the clutch release bearing is affected by a strong force from the high-speed rotating diaphragm spring, and this is why it starts to rotate suddenly. We have the last component, that is the cover plate. The cover plate is located alongside the flywheel and the clutch disc. The clutch covers form a friction system, and it is fixed to the flywheel via a screw connection of the housing. And in doing so, the clutch covers ensure the transfer of the engine torque via the clutch disc to the gear shaft by pressing the clutch disc onto the flywheel. That is the function of that cover plate. Now we have finished the components of a clutch and its function. We shall move to the principal operation of the clutch. The clutch is designed to engage and disengage the connection between the engine, flywheel, and the transmission input shaft. And here, there are two principal operations of the clutch, and we have the clutch engage and clutch disengage. Engaging the clutch allows power to transfer from the engine to the transmission and drive wheels, and disengaging the clutch stops the power transfer and allows the engine to continue turning without force to the drive wheels. Now, the clutch is operated by pushing on the clutch pedal inside the vehicle, which causes the clutch to disengage. And as the pedal is released, the clutch will engage. Let's start now with the clutch engage. When the clutch is engaged, the disc is squeezed between the flywheel and the pressure plate, and power from the engine is transmitted by the disc hub to the input shaft of the transmission. In layman's terms, a pressure plate is spring-loaded, that is clamped, which is bolted to the flywheel. That is how when the clutch is engaged. Now let's move to the clutch disengage. To disengage the clutch, the release bearing is moved toward the flywheel by the clutch fork. As the bearing contacts the pressure plate's release fingers, it begins to rotate with the pressure plate assembly, and as the release bearing continues to move forward and pressure on the release lever or fingers, it causes the force of the pressure plate spring to move away from the clutch. And in other hand, to engage the clutch, as earlier, the clutch pedal is released and the release moves away from the pressure plate. This is the action of that allows the pressure plate spring to force against the clutch disc. Engaging the clutch to the flywheel. Once the clutch is fully engaged, the release bearing is normally stationary and does not rotate with the pressure plate. Now we have seen the principal operation of the clutch and how the two operate. We will come back and see each type of a clutch, and we will start with single plate clutch. Here we have a single plate clutch, as you have seen here, and it has various components. It has a clutch pedal, it has fulcrum pin, we have bearings, we have clutch shaft, there is pressure plate, clutch plate, friction lining, we have the clutch spring and a flywheel. Single plate clutch is the one which is mostly used, and it is common type of clutch in most of the vehicles and light vehicles. It has only one clutch plate, which is mounted on the spline of the clutch shaft, and a flywheel is mounted on a crankshaft of the engine, and a pressure plate is connected to the flywheel to the bolt and clutch spring. The advantage with the single plate clutch are that clutch is more reliable. This clutch is more reliable and it will not bind like in the cone clutch, and slippage now is quite less, and there is very less power loss, and hence the heat generation is now quite less. The working of the single plate clutch is less complex and can be easily understood. The clutch requires 3 pieces, just as the other clutches. It requires only 3 pieces. It has the engine flywheel, friction disc, that is the clutch plate, and it has a pressure plate. These are the 3 components that a single plate clutch has. Now you can take a look on this diagram. As we have told, there is an engine flywheel. These are the main components. We have the clutch plate there, and we have also the pressure plate. Now let's go to the second type of clutch. We have the multi-plate clutch. The clutch, as we have seen from the definition, a clutch is a device and which is attached and which is used to attach and dismantle an engine with a gearbox and a clutch. And it's used to dismantle an engine with a gearbox. And a clutch in which 2 or more clutch plates are used is called multi-plate clutch. The multi-plate clutch has multiple plates so that we can transfer as much torque as possible. Adding plates to the contacts to create a multi-plate clutch will increase the torque capacity of the clutch without increasing the spring strength or clutch diameter. As the number of clutches plates increases, the number of friction surface will also increase, and hence the torque transmitting capacity of the clutch also increases. And now the multi-plate clutch is the one that uses multiple clutch plates to make contact with the engine flywheel to transfer power between the engine shaft and the transmission shaft. A multi-plate clutch is used in automobiles and machinery where high torque output is required. The advantage with this multi-plate clutch is that it increases the number of torque to be transmitted and decreases the pedal effort to operate the clutch. It also decreases both the weight of the clutch and the moment of inertia of the clutch. You can still look at this type where this clutch is used. There's various components here. We have the flywheel. If you can see, it has the crankshaft, just as usual. We have the friction lining, clutch pedal, fulcrum pin, we have the clutch shaft, we have bearings, we have the spring and clutch plates. This type of a clutch is the same as the single plate clutch, only that this has many or multiple plates. These multi-plate clutch are used in heavy vehicles with racing cars and motorcycles for transmitting high torque. Compared to single plate clutch, these are smooth and easy to operate due to assembly of friction surface and surface contact. Here, as you have seen the diagram, I think now you can understand just a single plate clutch, a multi-plate clutch has same components as single plate, and the only difference is that this has multiple plates. Now we are done with the two types of clutch. We can move to another type called diaphragm spring clutch. The diaphragm spring clutch uses a diaphragm or conical spring instead of coil spring to produce adequate pressure for engaging the clutch. The clutch cover is successfully secured to the engine flywheel. I think all these clutches are the same. The components are working the same, only the model is different. The pivot ring in this diaphragm spring clutch are held to the clutch cover. Diaphragm spring is one of the main parts of the clutch that creates pressure for the clutch. Besides creates pressure force of the clutch, it enables engagement and disengagement of clutch. Compared to push type diaphragm type of a clutch, pull type diaphragm spring clutch has many advantages compared to this spring one. And the first advantage is that it eliminates all parts of intermediate support without supporting ring or using only one supporting ring. It also makes its structure simpler, compact, fewer parts and less mass. You can take a look on the diagram here This is the diagram showing diaphragm spring clutch, and it has various components. It has a flywheel, it has clutch disc, it has crankshaft, it has a pressure ring or a pressure plate, it has a clutch cover, it has a diaphragm spring fulcrum, it has a diaphragm spring, it has an input shaft, it has a toe-out bearings, it has also a release fork. This is a diaphragm type of a clutch. We can move to another type. It is called cone clutch. A cone clutch serves the same purpose as a plate clutch, that is the single plate and the multi-plate clutch. However, instead of mating two spinning discs, the cone clutch uses two conical surfaces to transmit torque by friction. That is the difference, but it is the same as the plate clutch. Just as other type of clutch, cone clutch is a type of frictional clutch that is used to engage and disengage engine shaft to the transmission box shaft while changing gear ratio. Cone clutch uses two conical surfaces to transmit torque by friction. One surface is called the male member, and another one is called the female member. The disadvantage with this type of clutch is that it only uses a pair of friction surfaces and tendency to grab is very high. The small cone angle causes some reluctance in disengagement, and if the angle of the cone is smaller than 200, the male cone tends to bind or join in the female cone. Cone clutch applications includes in synchromesh gearboxes, and which synchronizes the drive and driven shaft speed to enable smooth engagement between transmission gears. The cap components connect rigidly to the drive shaft spinning with it as a unit. You can take a look on this clutch. There's various components. It has an outer cone, it has a driving shaft, it has friction lining, there is a contact lever, actuating spring, it has driven shaft and inner cone. And I think this is the diagram displaying it. I think this is the best diagram displaying a cone clutch. We can now move to another type. I think this is the last type. We have the coil clutch. Coil clutch. The coil clutch. Now let's discuss this coil clutch. What is a coil clutch, or what is clutch coil? A clutch coil is a unit consisting of many windings of wire fastened to the front of the air conditioning compressor. When current is applied, a magnetic field is set up that pulls the armature into the rotor to engage the clutch. This is also known as the clutch field. If we ask, what causes AC clutch coil failure? And I think the most cause of compressor clutch circuit fuses blowing is a compressor clutch coil having a resistance value which is too low. Taking an ohmmeter and checking the clutch coil resistance will quickly tell you the resistance. Just take a look on this coil clutch. Take a look on it. It has various components. It has a pressure plate. It has a clutch plate. It has a release lever, and it has also release bearings. I think this is the main parts, and I think this is the end. I think we have come to the end of this lesson, and thank you very much. Let's meet in the next lesson, where we will discuss about some means of adjustment, either manual or automatic, that must be provided in a clutch operating mechanism. And we will also look at possible clutch faults and its maintenance. We will have to explain this. Thank you. Let's meet in the next lesson.